boys, let's talk about rerolling in Blue Protocol Star Resonance. Blue Protocol Star Resonance is not exactly a gacha game, but it does features a battle imagi wheel gacha spanner. Outside of the 4 human type imagi, you can get everything else in the game by killing the bosses. But rerolling still provide minor to big long-term benefits depending on what class you're playing. The actual imagi can later be acquired in the game by killing bosses or to be purchased on the auction house itself, but it's very expensive and it will take you a long time of farming before you can get 1 copy. And if you want to max it out, you have to have 6 copies. So getting a early copy could be very beneficial in terms of your Blue Protocol Star Resonance journey, especially if you're a tank or healers, because tank and healers are mostly focused on the utility that the imagi give. They only need to start with 1 copy and you're able to get basically the entire thing. So if you're playing a tank and healer, you should consider rerolling. If you're playing a DPS, then it's lesser important to reroll. In terms of how efficient it is to reroll in the game, it really comes down to how much orb they give out in the game. When the Chinese server first come out, the server was going down like every day, so they gave everyone a bajillion orbs. Like, I literally have like 13k orbs right now in my account, and a lot of these are just from compensation. Every single time the server goes down, they give like 2,000 and stuff like that. So if you're looking to reroll, if you're looking to get ahead, you better pray that the global server goes down like the first day, and then they give out compensation. But an interesting trick is that they give out these compensation per characters. So what you immediately want to do is to create free characters in Blue Protocol Star Resonance so that each of these characters can collect their compensation, and then you can reroll on all of them. Especially because the first week progression is very time gated and very capped anyway. What you can consider is playing free characters, kind of bringing them to the same speed relatively with not a lot of effort. And then depending on which one get luckier on the gacha banner, depending on what you get on the gacha banner, you determine what class and which character you want to play later on, and then you turn the other characters into life skill ult. Ult in this game has almost no benefit other than to craft more life skills item. Specifically, you want to use your ult to craft food so that they can get the buff on your main characters, but otherwise ult don't provide any gear progression benefit for your main character in Blue Protocol Star Resonance. Alright, with that being said, let's talk about the gacha banners. The Will Wish here, you can select one of the 4 type human imagi, and when you get the SSR jackpot price, you're guaranteed to get the one you selected, at least the first one anyway. Between the 4, the 2 that are particularly useful is going to be Arona, presumably they don't nerf it, and then Tina. Outside of the SSR though, there also is the SR type gold imagi, which are pretty useful to get. But something to note is that when you do get a gold one, you get a completely random one, so you can't really choose what to get. And for the DPS, you just want to go for Mukushef. For tank, you want to go for like Tenten and stuff like that, which I'll cover in a bit. So that's why I said, like, depending on the RNG, you just debate like what class you want to play later. Something to understand is that the gacha banners only provide the actual wheel itself. You still have to actually craft the battle imagi before you can get the summon itself. And when you're starting out the game, it's very hard to get these legendary material to actually craft the battle imagi. So while you will have the wheel, if you do reroll from the gacha banner, you won't actually be able to craft it all the way until like 3-4 weeks later if you're lucky with the material, just because you won't have enough anyway. As a result, rerolling is for setting up long-term success in Blue Protocol Star Resonance rather than getting fast early game power, because very likely you won't actually be able to use the fruit of your labor until later. Another thing to understand about imagi in this game, as I've mentioned many times, is that you can refine them up to refine 5, so it takes 6 copy. It takes 1 level for the base copy, and then you need another copy of the wheel, as well as more material to level to refine 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, which give a bigger benefit, lower cooldown, and more stat and stuff like that. So as a result, like, even though you can get this later on in the game by getting the boss drop or by buying it on the auction house, getting a copy early of the recipe early anyway allow you to eventually later refine them higher down the line. So therefore, there's still like long-term benefit of getting the imagi early on the rerolling. As a tank or a healer, the 2 most obvious reroll target is going to be the SSR price, which are Arona and Tina. These are not farmable in the game, not purchasable on the auction house, but they have very big game-changing effect. The Arona give party revive that allow you to revive 4 people. It's extremely casual friendly. Many of the pugs will ask for Arona because it just makes the life so much easier. Someone is bound to die. You technically don't need it if your party never die, but that's kind of like a elitism thing to say. Someone in your pug party is gonna die for sure, and the party leaders or the raid leaders will heavily recruit Arona just so they can prevent someone from dying and stuff like that. So the Arona is a very pug friendly imagi. If you're pugging, highly recommend trying to go for the Arona imagi. If not, if you have a pre-made party, then going for the Tina is going to be more recommended just because it is a more powerful one in the game. It boosts your skill cooldown by 50% for the entire party, well, up to 10 surrounding allies, and it's very good for your DPS, especially if one of your DPS player is playing the Stormblade Eidol spec or the Frost Mage Icicle spec, because both of those class are extremely reliant on Tina. Well, more like they pump insane damage when they have Tina because they are very cooldown reliant class. So that is it for the SSR, but for SR there's a couple target for tank and healer as well. Tempest Ogre is one of the primary dominant one, especially for tank. The Tempest Ogre summon like a Blink Vortex that group up all the enemy, and this is very favorable for pretty much like dungeon farming, mobbings in general, and are occasionally used in raid as well to group up the trash mob. This is definitely the #1 reroll target to go for as a tank, and the benefit of being a tank or a healer is that you only need 1 copy to get the effect. You don't ever need to level it. Right, leveling up do give you like a lower cooldown and bigger passive effect and stuff like that, but the main benefit is going to be the AoE Vortex grouping, which you can already get just at the base copy. So this is one of the reasons why rerolling is so good on a tank or a healer, because majority of the tank and healer imagis grants majority of their benefit at just the base copy. So you can get one early on and you're set for like the rest of the game, right? Couple other good target is going to be the Frost Ogre, which is a very good CC and stagger imagi. It like frees all the enemy being struck, and it boosts your break for a period of time so that you can keep the mob like CC'd permanently. It's very good, especially in very high difficult extreme dungeons where you prefer to just CC the mob instead of letting them hit you so that you don't take damage. There's a funny meme for tank in CN right now, and that is that tank is secretly just a Pokemon trainer, because you carry all the imagi and you switch them based on the situation. You bring Tempest and Frost Ogre in high level dungeon so that you can group them and then CC all of them, and then when you do get to the boss, you switch these out for like Arona and Tina to make sure that the team get damage in, and if they do make a mistake and they do die, then use Arona to revive them and stuff like that. Good reroll target for healers is going to be either the Hive or the Bandit Leader. The Hive apply vulnerability debuff onto the enemy, like bosses and stuff like that, and when the enemy have the vulnerability debuff, your entire party will just do percentage more damage to it, so this is really good. The Bandit Leader summon an axe that gives your entire party an attack boost. The attack boost here is really small. It's like 5% at the base level, and they give 10% at the maximum level. So this is like lesser prioritized, but it's still really good if the party already have the rest of the imagis, which are like Tina, the Hive, and other things like. Let's talk about DPS, including the DPS healer. If you're playing the DPS healer, you can consider getting the Storm Goblin as well. So Storm Goblin has one of the most powerful passive effect in the entire game, where every single time you land a lucky strike, it drops like a meteors. This is actually a pretty big part of the DPS healer damage, and especially if you're a pay-to-win DPS healer and you get this to tier 5, because when you hit tier 5, there's an additional effect where every time you summon a meteor, it reduces the cooldown of it by 0.5 seconds. So it's extremely overpowered at tier 5, and this is like the chase for like pay-to-win DPS healer. Let's talk about the rest of the DPS, because the only imagi that you should reroll for on a DPS is Mukushef, unless you're playing Moonblade, right? The problem with gold tier imagis for DPS is that they have a passive effect that give flat stats. So for example, the Crab give 800 masteries, the whatever this is give like 800 versatility, the Goblin King is like an edge case because it summon all the goblin. The fish give like 800 haste, so they all give flat stat. They're really good early game when you don't have any stat, because the 800 flat stat is a lot, but they do get outscales really fast. For DPS, your goal should actually be going for the purple type imagis because these give percentage stats. So the Muku skull is one of the most used DPS imagi in the entire game because every single time you do damage, it gives you a stacking attack percent buff and you can stack up to 3 times, right? So this is really strong. It gives you 15% attack when you do stack it up. Likewise, you have the Bandit skull that gives you a percentage agility gain, and there's one for like intelligence. I think that's like the lizard or something. There's one for like strength. In general, a rule of thumb is that a +5 tier purple imagi for the DPS class is going to be better than the gold tier imagi unless you get this to tier 3 or higher. So you're going to be running the purple tier imagi for a long time, even at late game as a DPS, which is why rerolling is lesser important as a DPS, except the Mukushef. The Mukushef is going to be the imagi that basically every single DPS run because it gives crit and it has a passive effect that gives 10% crit damage. As far as I know, every single DPS in the game end up building crit and they all end up running the Mukushef anyway. Again, it is not necessarily better at the base copy, but this is going to be the biggest goal you target to tier 3 so that you can replace your purple type imagi, and getting one copy early so that you can start your journey to getting to tier 3 will be very important. There's going to be one DPS class that consider other imagi instead of the Mukushef, which is going to be the fish for Moonblade. Moonblade is a class that you pretty much pump haste all the way until you hit 80% attack speed, because at 80% attack speed, it's like a breakpoint, right? Without the fish, it's possible to hit 80% attack speed as far as I know, but it'll take you full perfect endgame gear in order to do so. So getting the fish will just be a lot easier for like all the casuals, for the like mediocre player, for the medium player. I think for both the Stormblade spec in the very end, if you're like super strong, if you're like end game, if you're able to hit the 80% attack speed without the fish, you actually end up running the Spider Craft and the Mukushef. So the Spider Craft could be a good reroll target if you're like a super dedicated Stormblade player in the very end. But again, the rule of thumb is that it's only going to be better if you like are able to get this to high tier than the purple type imagi. So this is something you have to consider, that if you're like going to be pushing it all the way, or you're just going to be like a casual filthy players, in that case like Mukushef is probably just the only reroll target. To summarize the information provided in this video, I made this helpful chart to hopefully help you remember. Again, like pretty good tips is to play all 3 characters and see which imagi you get, and then decide what role you want to play. Like if you just randomly got a Tempest, then you can consider going tank, because it is very beneficial to have a Tempest in your parties when you're doing dungeon run and other things like that. So with that being said, rerolling is not a must. It definitely help a little bit in the long run. Do remember the golden rule of thumb, and that is that purple tier 5 imagis are very likely going to be better than your gold tier 0 imagis. So in the long run, if you're a DPS and you're not getting that gold tier 3 imagis, then it's not going to matter anyway. But as a tank or a support, getting the first copy of some of these utility imagis are going to be really good for you. So with that being said, if this video helped you out like the rest of the guy on the rest of the channel, do be sure to subscribe for more guys so you don't miss out on stuff like that. See you guys later.